Good afternoon to you. I feel like a bit of a fraud. I've turned up right at the end. Can I say thank you very much indeed for the invitation. I want to say a little bit really about the journey I've taken. I understand the concept today is bridges, and I want to talk about that in some detail, if I will. And surely you're absolutely right. I've had a checkered career. I've prosecuted or supervised the prosecution of about 1 million cases during 25 years. And some of them are high profile, many of them are not. And I want to make the point that just because you're high profile doesn't mean that you don't get the justice. It's about fear, no favor, whoever you are. Ultimately, if you commit a crime, you should be brought to justice. Now, I thought about whether it should be a red poppy or a white poppy. And my son said to me, well, Dad, they're the same thing, just different color. And he then said, just like you and Tom Cruise. And I thought that was you don't know my son, he's a piss taker. And undoubtedly what he said. But the reality is that when we talk about men and women, for example, we're the same thing with different genders. And one of the things that I've been conscious of over the years is that men exert their power because we can't share it. It's as simple as that. You know, there is no solution, ladies and gentlemen, where men aren't the problem. And there is no community where women and girls are safe. It's a fact. I've come across cases from everywhere. And you think about the 50 shades of violence against women and girls. You think about feticide, infanticide, child and early marriage. You talk about FGM. You talk about child sexual abuse. Then you talk about forced marriage. And then you have domestic abuse and sexual offenses and rape and financial abuse. You have homicide and suicide. I mean, we often know the figure, don't we, that 2 women a week are killed in this country in domestic abuse situations, domestic violence. The one that people perhaps don't know is that 10 women kill themselves every week because of domestic abuse in this country. And that tells me something about what we should be doing differently. Now, from my perspective, the answer is very simple. You've got to challenge those kinds of behaviors. And one of the things I want your help with, ladies and gentlemen, is to be the bridge between the men who want to make a difference to the women who are making a difference. In my experience over 20-odd years of prosecuting, and more recently, the women are already making the difference. They're already making phenomenal achievements. They are succeeding in ways that you couldn't possibly imagine, but they often don't have access. And that's where I've been able to be a bridge. It's not something I chose to be. It's something I wanted to be. I remember back in 2004, 2005, I organized the first conference on the National Conference on Forced Marriage. And like many conferences, I would hold the conference and then walk away and let somebody else do the business. But women's groups came up to me afterwards and said, Nazir, we've got no men speaking about this subject. We've got no men with access to legislation or to parliament or to ministers and the like. And so I said, well, tell me all about it. And they said, well, surely you know, because you're brown. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I've been married 3 times. To my great shame. My first wife was Catholic, my second was Hindu, my third was Sikh. I've done my bit for multi-faith engagement. But I've never been forced into marriage. I've never been forced into marriage. And so I had to learn, and they taught me everything I knew. And then I said, well, I'll take that. I will take that to the state. And I managed to make sure that there were working groups set up. We legislated. We created forced marriage, civil protection, forced marriage criminalization. We have done everything we possibly can. And we need to do more, undoubtedly. But we're in a position now where the American State Department, until last year, had me as their advisor. Somebody called Trump came along. I don't know what happened then. I'm not allowed to go to America anymore, I think. But for the Americans to say that we were better than them at something is something. And that was a journey that was undertaken by NGOs with my help and support. No more, no less. It was their ideas. And then there was modern slavery. You probably don't know this case. It's a little-known case, but one that was impactful. There was a family called the Asher family in Manchester, of all places. And they had in their care is a wrong word, a 19-year-old girl who was counterfeiting T-shirts for them. That was their business. That's what they did. They counterfeit T-shirts. But she was brought into this country at the age of 10, and she did not have a British passport. She could not speak, she had severe learning difficulties, and she couldn't hear properly. Trading Standards found her in the premises and said, Nazir, what can we do about this? And I said, we'll prosecute this. We will make sure we prosecute. It took us 2 years to teach her sign language. in order for her to give evidence. You probably don't know this. Of everybody I've prosecuted, she was cross-examined for 40 days because we could only ask her, or they could only ask her 6 questions a day. We put some rules in. They were convicted, the whole family were convicted of the abuse of her. And consequently, ladies and gentlemen, we confiscated their property. She's now at university. She now has a home, and they're in prison. It's her journey that we need to talk about, the victim's journey. The victim, throughout my experience, has a journey that we will never understand unless we really make the point of understanding. I think in recent weeks, we've been hearing about the victim's journey, haven't we? We've been learning about how, oh, surely they should have said something. But then we men make it impossible for them to do so. We put structures in place that make it impossible for them to do so. Forgive me, I've got a cough. Can I have the water, please? I told my wife I've got pneumonia this morning, by the way. It's what men do generally. But one of the things that struck me is that unless you follow the journey, you have no idea where they're going. And this is what you've been talking about in terms of bridges. There's no point building a bridge if you don't know the journey the victim is taking. So perhaps people remember me most for the 3 girls, the Rochdale grooming case. Now, an actor played me, a very handsome actor played me. My wife has a picture of the actor on the wall where my picture used to be. I'm not hurt. But that case was symbolic of where we were as a landscape and where we were culturally. We were saying to victims, we don't hear you, we don't want to listen to you, we don't believe you. And the fact that they came from very chaotic and troubled backgrounds meant that we had an excuse. The reality is the predator was picking on them because they thought we wouldn't listen to them. So we were doubly damning them. We were not supporting them, we were not giving them a hope. And again, in many senses, I was a bridge. There were phenomenal women working, trying to protect these women, these girls, and give them support. But at the end of the day, they were not getting justice. And so as you'll know from the film, I reversed the decision not to prosecute. I took this case on, and I made sure that those men were convicted, and those women got justice. And they are women. And they may well be, people forget they were girls. They were 13, 14-year-old girls. What would they know about relationships? What do they know about relationships? What they do know is that there's a predator, and that predator will pick on them wherever they go. Now, that journey where people were saying no to them, where people were ignoring them, where people were not listening to them, is one that we had to deal with. And so this is where we started dealing with it. So we now have a situation where when I left the CPS prosecution service in 2015, we had the highest conviction rate for child sexual abuse in our history. That's not me. That's people understanding and beginning to understand that these young girls needed support. Now, what happened to me is a little-known fact. Now, what do you think happened to me? I was lauded. I was a hero. No. The far right came for me. They said, and this is, I noticed yesterday Collins have said that fake news is a new word. They created websites saying that I was the one that didn't prosecute these guys. And the far right then came for me in a big way. I had an English Defence League demonstration outside of my home. I had a panic alarm in my house. My children had to go to school by taxi. I had 17,000 emails on one day calling for me to be sacked and deported. I was born in Birmingham. I don't want to go back there. Right? But I wasn't going to allow them to stop me. I got some phenomenal support from women's groups and the like who said, Nazir, we're going to stand by you and support you. And they helped me through that period, as did my staff, as did my teams. Now, I'm conscious of the fact that this is something you can't do alone. This is something we all have to do together. And in order to walk across that bridge, as that young girl did in the Asher case, as those victims did in the Rochdale case, as many others have done, they had to trust me. And I had to open myself up to them and say, trust me. But never let them down. One of the things that people have been saying are your expectations. You've got to meet their expectations. You've got to give them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the answer, ladies and gentlemen, is education. I'm sure you've heard it during the day. There's no point doing relationship education when they're 12 or 16. It's too late. At 5, 6, that's when you talk to them about human rights. That's when you talk to them about women's rights. That's when you talk to them about relationships. And to my mind, the answer is there. 2 final stories. The Stuart Hall prosecution, one woman out of 14 didn't get justice. She said to me, when I went to her, crying my eyes out, thinking, how do I explain this to her? I said to her, I don't know, I'm sorry I didn't give you closure. She said to me, you gave me closure the moment that you believed me. That's the answer, believing her. And my journey along this bridge started 20 years ago, when a woman I ran into at an event showed me her wedding ring was not on this finger, but on the opposite hand. And I said to her, why are you wearing your wedding ring on the wrong finger? And she said, it's because they forced me to marry the wrong man. And I thought for a second, I giggled actually, sadly, but I thought for a second, hang on a minute, that's a life of hopelessness, a life of despair, a life of daily rape, of child protection issues, a horrific life. Yet that is her protest, because she didn't have a voice. And I made it my responsibility, as I know it is yours, to be her voice. Thank you very much indeed.